You are listening to all of it on WNYC. I'm Alison Stewart. In the new Wicked film adaptation, Glinda and Elphaba go on a journey to meet the Wizard of Oz. And now let's meet the wizard behind the film's detailed, practical, yet fantastical set design. Nathan Crowley is nominated at this year's Oscars for his Wicked production design. He's previously worked on films like The Greatest Showman, The Dark Knight, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and more. Instead of just relying on just CGI, Crowley and his team built the sets for Emerald City, Shiz University, and Glinda and Elphaba's dorm room. And yes, it's true, they did plant 9 million tulips for the meadows. Nathan Crowley is with us now from the UK, fresh off his BAFTA win on Sunday. He's here as part of our Oscar series, The Big Picture, where we spotlight talent nominated for their work behind the camera. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi, nice to meet you, Alison.
Nice to meet you as well. And congratulations on the BAFTA win, by the way.
No, it was a fantastic evening.
I'm not sure that people really understand how many practical sets you used. Why was it important to you in the film?
I think, well, first of all, I sort of come from films where we do things practically. I don't think a lot of people know that. We tend not to advertise it that much. But on this film, we were moving into fantasy, and it was really important to not solely rely on CGI, because I think audiences feel that. So we have to intertwine it with practical sets. And that's really to get sort of an old school feeling. It changes the look when you build it for real. You extend it with CGI, but you go as high as you can to 50 foot, and you try and interweave it so the audience, feels the sort of originality or the nostalgia of the set, rather than being popped out of the experience by too much CGI. So the balance was essential.
What does it do for the actors to be on a CGI set? I mean, on a non-CGI set, on a practical set?
Well, what's amazing is, especially with younger actors, they're not used to seeing fully realized sets, and so we also we have animatronic puppeteers, and we did the big wizard's head physically, and it was all it's 15 foot high. It was all animatronic, so it could have expressions. So when that came out of the curtain, I think we got we got Glinda and Elphaba to jump. But you should, because the theory behind that is he tries to intimidate people. Mm-hmm. So you want it to be surprising, and you want the audience to sort of sit back in their seats as well. So
I was going to ask then, what does the theater goer get from practical sets?
Well, hopefully they feel like they believe. I mean, as a designer, your ultimate task is to a little bit go unnoticed and let the audience sink into Oz and the story and the narrative. So if we can put them there in that place without them questioning it, to me, we've done our job in cinema. To me, mm-hmm. Cinema is about falling into the film and losing yourself for however long the film runs. And so can we keep you lost in Oz for over 2 hours? And to me, that's the job.
You obviously work with director John Chu. What ideas did you have when you first read the script and you first talked to him?
Well, how did it work? He phoned. We had a long chat on a Zoom call, and then Mark Platt got involved. Mm-hmm. And they asked me to come out to LA and spend a few days with John. And I think that process of a designer and director is you spend days or weeks together, and you try and find visually the film. He has a script. He has ideas of what he's looking to do and what kind of sort of wondrous, whimsical world John wanted. But I need to now sit with him and take that vision of that film he's running in his head, and I need to put it into mine, and then get the visuals going. So it's about spending time with people, because we're all just searching for the film. And it doesn't like, oh, this is the way we're going to do it, A, B, C, D. It's like you're kind of investigating it. Like you're investigating Oz, you're investigating Wicked, the stage show. You're investigating the fact that it's an American fairy tale, and we need Americana, and what are those images? Like the train is an American image, in the giant flat barley fields. We planted those as well.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to the barley. we got we got a lot to
So
discuss.
you're looking for themes. You're looking for visual themes, and we work like the writers work in a writer's room where they put up scenes and and they try and find the jigsaw puzzle of the story. We do the same, but with visuals. We try and find common threads and themes and ideas by putting images on the wall in scene order, and you try and run a film as a sort of visual storyboard. So it's pretty exciting stuff when you're in those rooms. You lose hours and hours because you're lost in a visual process, and that's engaging.
What was challenging? What was a scene that was particularly challenging for you as a production designer on Wicked? And he's laughing at me.
It was all challenging. I mean, I've done a lot of big films, and this was by far the biggest and most challenging. And I sort of I've made my own problems by saying I want to build as much of it practically, and that caused problems for my crew. So I think physically, Shiz was probably the toughest. Design-wise, sort of mentally, design-wise, Emerald City was the trickiest because it's a very difficult image to sort of find a new look for. But Shiz, because we've decided, when we're in those rooms, we say, okay, how do you get to Shiz? You can't go by horse and cart because you're stepping on the freedom of the animals, and that's part of the narrative. You can't go by balloon because the wizard owns that. You can't go by mechanical clockwork train because the wizard owns that as well. You can't go by, there's no cars in Oz. So you end up with an obvious thing. It's like, oh, rivers. We go by river. We got to get Glinda and all the other students into Shiz by river and boat. So if you're a practical filmmaker, you go find a river and then you go and build a boat, an Aussie boat, and you get a journey. And that, to me, is cinema. That journey is the start of dear old Shiz, and you've got to go in through the archway. And the problem with, then you go in through the archway and you realize we've got to build a backlot that has a water tank in it. So you create your own. So then you've got to build a giant water tank, and then you've got to build the set in the water tank. And then you have to figure out how we're going to shoot it, because the camera crew is like, how are we going to shoot this?
Looks real pretty. How do we do it?
So, I mean, I built water tanks before, not this size. And I can tell you this, there is no water tank in film that doesn't leak. So,
That's so
I mean, but it's at the same time, I'm with my construction team of 20 years. And it's like, okay, we're going to try and attempt this, and that they get excited and they go, okay, how can we do? And the physics of that and the mechanics, and then you've got special effects coming in, and they're saying, well, how can we do this? And how can we move this? How can we rotate bookshelves? But it excites everyone. No one is bored on that set.
My guest is Nathan Crowley, Oscar nominated for Wicked. He is a production designer. He's here as part of our installment, The Big Picture series, where we speak to Oscar nominated talent who work behind the camera. How big was your team?
It goes up and down depending on the way you build is you sort of build up to the backlots, which are the largest sets, and then we had 3 of those. So you step up in crew member, then you come back down. So the exact number, I can tell you at one point we had 1,000 construction, 1,000 members of the construction team working on the 3 backlots. And you can't do that for very long because your budget is burnt.
Yeah.
So you have it takes an enormous amount of organization. It's actually the problem with big filmmaking is it's the same, I guess, in any industry. You end up with a lot of management. It becomes its own problem in an odd way.
That was actually going to be one of my questions. You would think it was an endless budget, but all budgets have an end.
No, and you try and we don't go over budget, so you try and get right to the edge of it, but trying to use all the money properly and get it on film and keep it within the target it's difficult, and you have to make hard decisions on that road. Like, I remember the Emerald City was the final backlot we built, and after Shiz, my construction manager Paul Hay said to me, "I think we spent too much on Shiz. We're going to have to make some cuts on Emerald
Cuts
City."
of the Emerald City? You get to...
Yeah, and it was like, no, we can't. We can't on the Emerald City. And then we both said, well, we have an enormous amount of scenery because it's the last set. Like, let's get it all. Let's go and look at it all and see if we can repurpose, some of it. And like, can we jigsaw puzzle this so we don't have to build certain things? And so, it's like fluid thinking,
Yeah, you shopped your closet.
Yeah, exactly. We recycled everything.
When you were thinking about the production design of Wicked, you obviously have to think about The Wizard of Oz and that universe. And as you said, the Americana of it all. What was your original relationship with The Wizard of Oz?
I grew up in London, and once a year, at Christmas, I'd watch the Wizard of Oz every Christmas. So probably like many kids. And so I kind of knew that film pretty intimately. And to sort of take on the 39 film and really put, because it was done with backings very cleverly on a sound, on the MGM sound stages. It might be in the Warner sound stages. Anyway, it doesn't matter. To push into that backing and cross through the backing into Emerald City was really the challenge. It's like, I want to get off the Yarrow Brick Road. I want to physically go into Emerald City. I mean, the Wicked, the play obviously has Shiz, has some different scenery that the Wizard of Oz doesn't have.
Did you do research into the making of The Wizard of Oz or even Wicked?
I obviously went to see Wicked many times. The Wizard of Oz, I sort of started in the film industry at Warner Brothers and MGM, the old MGM, which is now Sony. So I love the history of those sound stages. So I used to go and look at them and look at what was shot in there, and so I sort of had the research in my head, if that makes sense. Because it was always there. And there's an interesting thing about the old MGM lot, which is obviously where they did a lot of great musicals, is all the stages are different sizes, and that's because you build different sets and you have a requirement. And nowadays all the stages are the same size, which I never understood. It's like, well, you might want to get really high or really low, so anyway, sorry, I went off.
That's okay. How did you get your start in production design?
Where was I? I was living in Los Angeles, and I had been a set designer and then an art director. I was lucky enough to start on Hook, which kind of has a weird relevance to this, but I was just a draftsman. And then my production design start was really when I moved to Ireland. I went to Ireland to make Braveheart as an art director, and I stayed there. And Barry Levinson hired me on a very small film he was doing there as the production designer. So that's Barry Levinson actually was the one who got me started on a film called An Everlasting Peace, which is sort of a play on wigs.
Well, what did you learn from An Everlasting Peace that has stuck with you as a production designer?
You have to have a voice in the room, and you have to have a voice in the room, and you have to have sort of ideas, and you have to sort of look and see and think. It's a very sort of design for me is about like fluid thinking. It's like, how are we going to solve that? It's not about negativity. It's about positivity and solving problems. And I think that Barry taught me how you could see a problem, just look at it differently. So I think that's where that's how it started, really.
That's interesting. You said problems and puzzles.
Yeah.
I sense that you do a lot of that.
Yeah, the puzzle is to like how how are we going to do, how are we going to build a 100-foot train and run it for a barley field? It's like, so you all sit around with my team. It's like, okay, well, what's that train look like? Who is the wizard? He's an illusionist. What mechanics do illusionists have? And it's like, if you go back to the late 1800s, you have automatons, and you look at the orange tree, and the orange tree was a watchmaking. It seemed to come to life, but it was all just mechanics. And so that feeds back into who the wizard is. He's more than an illusion. He's more than the man behind the curtain. He has a sort of a automaton sort of clockwork technology, and then you push that back into the train, because we don't just want a steam train. You want the wizard's train, and so you have to find a way into that design and how you can manipulate the themes or the story to help you give him technology. And then you apply that to the head, when he's got all those cranks in the film and he's pulling all those levers, and that operates his mechanical head. So it's kind of, does that make sense?
Yes, but it's interesting because it does come from the character.
Yeah, everything comes from the script. So I guess that's what I was saying early on. I kind of want John to put his version of the script into my head, so we can then take his characters and what he wants from the film, and push it back into design and see if we can find themes like the tulips were all the colors of the rainbow, or you have to work back from what do we want to gain from color? And it's like, well, all the colors of the rainbow is like, what can we grow? And then you immediately go to tulips. So you sort of work your way back to the idea, if that makes sense.
All right, let's talk about those 9 million tulips you planted. I swear, I researched it. I put it in Google. I'm like, 9 million? You planted 9 million tulips leading up to Emerald City. Logistically, how does one get 9 million tulips?
Well, you need 9 million bulbs from Holland. And
there are none in Holland anymore.
Yeah. But it's sort of like, how did that come about? I remember we were in meetings and it was like, we shouldn't do this digitally. And there was a push. It's like, well, how else are you going to do it? It's like, well, we could grow them. And the only reason I worked on Interstellar, and we grew 500 acres of corn for the film. And so which was nerve-wracking, but I knew it could be done. So if I applied that experience to Wicked, I could then grow tulips. And then my location manager, Adam, is like, can you find me a tulip farmer we can go and talk to? And so Mark, the tulip farmer, was brilliant. He was saying, okay, we're going to have to buy 9 million. Well, actually, I thought he said 1 million, which I thought was a lot. But I sort of misheard him, because I showed him the kind of area we needed, and we found a location to do it. And I said, I need to fill this amount of fields. And I thought he said 1 million. So I went back to the producers and said, we need to buy 1 million bulbs immediately from Holland. For this, we need to write a check. And which they did. And then, but when I went back to see him, he said, yeah, I've got to get those 9 million bulbs into the ground before the ground freezes. And I said, what? And anyway, so that's how 9 million came up. But really, it was based on the size of the fields I needed to fill.
What went through your brain when you heard the word 9 million, when you thought it was 1 million?
I got a bit worried, because it's like, oh my God, I told everyone it was 1 million.
I would like to have heard that.
The location manager, I said, do we tell them? I think I told John Chu, and he was so happy. It was 9 and not 1. He was, he's a very excitable, brilliant man. So he was like,
he's good. 9's great. 9's the best.
Well, sometime later, I asked the farmer, Mark, I said, yeah, you came to 9 million. He said, well, yeah, no, I thought we needed 12. And it kept on growing. It was very abstract, I guess, farming. So
My guest is Nathan Crowley. He's Oscar nominated for Wicked in production design. It's part of our Big Picture series where we look at the talent behind the camera. Let's talk about a little bit of a smaller scope, the dorm room between Elphaba and Glinda. It's so interesting. How did you telegraph that these two are going to be living together, but clearly not in harmony?
Well, so that was a difficult set as well because we have a huge song number to do in there, popular, and so we had to make it can't be a small dorm room. It needs to be part of Shiz. It needs the character. It needs some romantic character to it. It needs some feminine qualities. So it was a difficult start. So I knew that I had to make the room circular, or it wasn't circular, it was elliptical at the end, but I knew if I made it circular the camera wouldn't feel the restriction of the space, and we could frame up the two little sort of half moon pockets we made for their bed. I knew we could sort of make it feel small or big but not get bored of the space, and then if we put enough decoration in. So one thing we do as designers, we go and we look at places, not necessarily to shooting because we know we're going to build we're going to build that set, but to get inspiration and play out a scene in a real space and see how we feel about it. And the Brighton Pavilion, which is down on the south coast of England, I knew pretty well because I went to art school down there, and it was built by the Prince Regent, which is this sort of crazy Taj Mahal sort of Chinese influence palace. I mean, it's the only piece of architecture I think in England that is Aussian. So we stood in there and we went up to the crazy onion domes at the top. And we got a little private tour, and it's like, okay, the room needs to be elliptical. It's got to be in one of these domes, and that was the start of it. And then we worked with the choreographer and John because they're figuring out a huge dance scene, so we have to work side by side. So we had a rehearsal stage for the dancers, and then we had a rehearsal stage with a rough layout of what might be the set in plywood, and then we had the real stage where we're building the real set. And as the three sort of came together, we would adjust and manipulate the set to work for the action, because in popular there's these trunks and there's hydraulics, and those are all practical effects. And then so you have to lift the set 6 feet off the ground on a rostrum, and you've got all this hydraulics underneath popping up clothes and racks and shoes and makeup. It's all done from underneath. I mean, it's sort of a stage show within itself. So you need everyone to come together, and having a sort of physical mock-up of a set that you can change, I think is essential in a musical.
We got a text here that says, "What happened to all those tulips?"
Yeah. Well, okay, here's the thing I learned about tulip farming. And this is why it's kind of great fun, because you go and hang out with tulip farmers and you learn about something you would have never known about. So you don't use the flowers from the bulbs you put in the ground. You plant them, and then when they get to a certain size, you chop all the heads off, and then the energy goes down into the bulb and makes it bigger, and then you end up with a bigger bulb that the following year you put into a greenhouse, and that's the flower you grow to sell. And that's why you have tulip festivals, because you cut all the heads off the flowers and they put them all on the floats, and So of course I didn't know this, and the farmer was doing these sketches for me. He's like, "Oh, the bulb starts here and it goes to this big, and then we put it," it's like going back to farming school. So actually, the bulbs all got lifted and went into greenhouses to make better tulips for the market.
Who knew? Nathan Crowley is Oscar nominated for production design for Wicked. It was a joy to speak with you. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks, Alison.